Oh, white. All right, people are starting to get on. People are leaving. Let's see if people start getting back on. My camera actually works this time. My stream works today. That's exciting. So I'm gonna give people some time to hop on to the stream, but I hope every third person is back. I hope people are well. Only 3 people. This section is much bigger than 3 people. I'll give it another minute or 2. Hello, person that just said hello. Haha, 4 people. Bug people on Discord, they start hopping on. So, all right, I guess I'll just start talking some housekeeping stuff then. So, a few things. One of them is that the so I've been getting some questions about the assignments, and so normally in my classes what I do is I will give you these like design brief documents, and I'll have them available in the like the front end of Blackboard. The reason I don't in this class is that your big major assignments, which is going to be your storyboard and your your animatic, which you're going to see like both of in this lecture, are like essentially part of your homework. So your homework, if we understand those things to be like bigger assignments, those things are tied into homework assignments that like build into them, if that makes sense. Excuse me. So like rather than do your animatic as like a separate thing, you're going to have a few assignments that are set to be like make this part of the animatic or make that part of the animatic. Same thing with the storyboard, like have a draft of storyboard or something. So the point of the assignments is that they your projects are rolled into the assignments so that you are doing a few things. One, you're doing them over time, so that by having chunks of them due, you are not like putting it off, and then like having crunch time. Because what that's going to do is like, if we understand these things to be potential portfolio pieces, you don't want to have a crappy rushed portfolio piece. Because, like, and obviously not a crappy rushed final project, because then that'll result in like a lower grade. But bigger scope, if these things be potential portfolio pieces, you want the best portfolio piece possible. So that's why like we want you to work on them over time. The other thing with this is that this clears your plate of that thing, as long as like if it's not the homework, like you should be thinking about it, but it doesn't need to be the like immediate task, if that makes sense. So like we want you to do the drawing exercises, and the drawing exercises are meant to be, and let me reiterate this because people have been freaking out about these too. The drawing exercises are exercises and practice. They are not being judged on quality. I know people are saying like, oh, it took me hours and hours because I draw slow, or I'm trying to make everything perfect, or things like that. They're not, this isn't like an engineering class where you have to do something to spec. These are exercises to get you to practice. They're to get you to slow down, to experience and build the feel of drawing and animation. They're not busy work. They are your opportunity to get a hands-on experience with like this medium. We're having you do drawing because drawing is the foundation to everything else in art and animation. I actually like polled some industry folks over the last week to kind of get a perspective on this, because I know this has been like a big pervasive class discussion of like, well, why do we need to draw? Well, you need to draw, and a few of these people backed this up. When I polled some folks on social media, they said, drawing is how I communicate. Drawing is how I work out ideas. I just do some like sketching in a sketchbook, and that sketching lets me draft things without having to make the big formal version or make it with a slower medium like 3D where I'm having to do like modeling and texturing and rigging and all those other steps to see a result. You can just kind of like take a pen out and then on some paper and like doodle it up and like see if the framing or composition or the layout of something works. So that's why drawing is important at a very primal level. The other thing is that like it gives you an attention to detail. It improves your eye. It improves your sense of scale and proportion in ways that 3D does not, like dealing with Maya does not. So, that's why we want you to do these drawing exercises, because they give you a sense of the animation in a much more kinesthetic way and not a technological way. Because like even though we're using Blender, which is a 3D program on a computer, as opposed to like a stack of trace paper and a pen, you are drawing, you are feeling you're feeling the art of it in a much more like physical way than you are, again, doing just clicking around in Maya or something like that. So, that's why that exists. But again, it's not that we want you to do this like picture perfect thing. We want you to just engage the process and practice. So some of you are coming from all different levels of drawing experience. Some of you are like practiced artists. Some of you are like, I've never picked up a pencil in my entire life. And that's okay. There's not judgment there, but this is your time to develop that skill. So if you're good, you use the time to become great. If you've never picked up that pencil, there you go. Now you've got time to do it, because that is what the assignment is for the week. So it's like your permission to practice. So that's how I want you to think of those, is that you should be like, take that opportunity to practice, to try. A lot of you have been asking me too, like, oh man, would it be okay if I did this? So there's a story that I've read about like Disney animators where they will do, so a lot of, in case you're not aware, a lot of these drawing exercises we're having you do are drawing exercises that come from like major studios. So like these are things that major studios do with each other to like either animation, other animation schools or big studios do to like hone animators' skill and get them to, again, kind of like kinesthetically interact with the process of animation and art. And again, like that helps you and forms the basis of your eye and your brain so that you can translate it into 3 dimensions if you choose to do a bunch of 3D animation. But all of these are big studio things. These are like Disney animators. I actually, the picture that I used from in the Blackboard assignment for the Flower Sack is from Disney Animation, The Illusion of Life, from that book. And, that is the animation that they are doing. This isn't, again, this isn't busy work. This is like you doing things that legends have done. But the story I read was that in some cases, like how the animator added their own twist to something, almost like determined, when they were doing like animation tests or something, it actually helped them figure out like how, like where should that person go. So I have to look it up again, but like, in the book they talk about the bouncing ball exercise, which you've done, and they talk about like, well, this guy put a stripe on the ball, so we send them to like the technical art department where they are doing the animations on, like, if something falls into the water and the water splashes, they animate the water splash because they have an eye for explicit, like, detail of motion and things like that. Likewise, like what happens when some guy, I'm using guy, well, I mean, historically that's accurate, but you know what I mean. Some person draws, like they say do the ball animation, they make it a bowling ball, and instead of bouncing, the ball just goes woof, and like makes a hole in the ground. That might be somebody who they want to have like do some of the gag stuff because they are both funny, but also maybe like really sell the idea that this ball is gonna, like, you think it's about to do something and then it does another thing, and they've subverted the expectation, and then so maybe they've like really sold and made this a funny gag. So there's lots of little things you can do to these. Like, I want you to explore, I want you to feel creative with these, so again, the drawing exercises are opportunities. They are not tests, they are not judgments. They are, like, we will give you, I say that because somebody else is teaching another section of this, but we want to give you feedback, but the feedback, again, is not judgment. It's us giving you suggestions so that you can get better, because that's why you do this stuff. That's why you make things, and then you get feedback so that it makes you better. So that's what's going on. But yeah, let me know if there are any questions about assignments or drawing or things like that. Yeah, but I'm gonna get to lecturing here. And what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about storyboarding. Sorry, cracked my back. So storyboarding. So what is storyboarding? Well, we're going to go over that. We're going to go over the function of storyboarding, why it exists, what is the process of storyboarding, how storyboards are built, and why they're built that way, and then what, like, where does it sit in the process of animation. So we have done, the way that the class has gone so far is, like, we talked about some drawing stuff to get you going on the drawing stuff so that we could do those drawing exercises. Now we're discussing, we're doing like our few weeks on the process of developing animation. And one thing that I hope you're taking from this is that animation is a discipline in which, and game design is the same thing. If you want to get into game design, it's the same way. These are disciplines where you do a lot of planning, and you do a lot of figuring things out in your process, and then that figuring out makes the point at which you actually sit down at your software much easier, because you're not at that point you're just like making the thing that you've already kind of like answered all the questions about. You're just making it, and that's going to seem really maybe foreign to some of you. I've been teaching this for a long time, and one of the things that I see in a lot of students, because the software is very difficult, they get really hung up on the software, and they think it's all about the software. And I actually talked to the first year FYE students today about some of this, kind of like give them a mental foundation of like what to think about as they are in the major. And one of the things I said is, like, first of all, you're not at a technical school. This isn't like, one of those schools where you go and you get a CAD degree or like a CAD certificate. And, those exist. But, your utility on a team is not the software you use. Like, understand, like, take a second to think about that. That is not your function. You are not, like, you could get a job where you are, like, that might be your function, but that's not, like, who you are as a human being. You are not Maya. Unless your name is Maya. I don't have any people named Maya in the class this semester. But, you are not just a sack of meat that uses 3D Studio Max, basically. You are a human being with creative ideas and who, like, has a career ahead of them. And, that career might come with, like, why are we learning Blender? Well, you're learning Blender because, part of this, and you're learning it quickly, and you're learning a chunk of it rather than the whole thing, and rather than taking a whole class on it, because it's normal in the industry to learn a piece of software, to, like, go home for a weekend, look at some YouTube videos, and, like, pick up a piece of software to, like, help solve a problem at work. That's normal. We do that all the time. The things that you learn in school aren't the things that you're going to carry with you for your entire career. Sometimes they might be, and that would be incredibly lucky for you and the software company that makes the thing that you specialize in. But in all likelihood, like, the stuff that I learned in college, I don't use anymore. And some of that's because I chose other stuff. Like, I could still use 3D Studio Max if I wanted to, but I need to use Maya for work. And I've decided to use Blender in my professional, like, in my personal work, for a variety of reasons. But, like, you make those types of decisions. And then the game engines that I started working with when I started my game development career, like, either don't exist or are in very different forms than they used to be, such that I'd probably need to, like, treat them like a whole new program. So, stuff comes and goes, and that's normal. But, what we're looking at with this storyboarding, and what I hope you're picking up, is that the act of sitting down at the computer is actually just, like, a really small part of it. It's a part that involves a lot of overhead work, which is why you've taken classes on these things. And there's this famous game developer, Rami Ismail, who talks about, like, what are the easy problems and the hard problems. And the easy problems are actually the tech problems because they have objective answers. There's always the button, there's always the documentation that can just deliver you to the right answer. The hard answers are the creative problems. And they're hard because they don't have objective solutions. They have solutions that you concoct. And those concoctions come from your planning, your ideas, and your mastery of principles in the field. So, a lot of this, again, that's where this production and this planning comes in, is you are going through this whole process of establishing your pipeline and then enacting it. But by the time you've gotten to the point where it's time to enact, the rest is just clicking buttons. So that's what storyboarding is about. It's about, like, how do we translate this story that we've come up with into the draft document such that we can hand this to an animator and they almost can just, like, mechanically produce it. Not that it's a mechanic operation. There's a lot of creativity and acting that goes into animation. But how do we remove as many questions and make the animation process, like, as smooth as possible? So that's what storyboarding is about. So storyboarding, I'm not going to read this, like, word for word, but it's you taking the script of your story and you are turning it almost into a comic of your story. And so it's done after the script's been written. It helps somebody visualize the story, so you are creating a draft of what the cartoon will look like. And, so example, like, look at this storyboard here. you have several different shots going on. Let me. So you have like clearly there is a panning going on in the first 3 shots of this. So the story is like the bride is unsure about marrying Soul Patch here. And so like you have the shot panning across, you see the groom's family, and then it pans and you see the bride and the groom, and then you see the bride and the bride's family. And like everybody's pretty happy, but you can see clearly that the bride is not. But that pan across sets the scene. And then you have 3 different shots that show this story. You have the, and this is all like, there's no dialogue here. It's all body language. But you have the 2 characters in a shot together. He bows his head, like he's enjoying the wedding. And then you see her turn away, and then you see a sort of like dun-dun look of shock on his face. But, these are laid out in a very simple art style, and it's using arrows as a diagramming method to show what that movement looks like. So we're going to look at the different ways that how you plan a storyboard and what kind of information gets put into a storyboard. Now, I'm not going to show this here, but in the Discord chat, I shared a bunch of YouTube videos of both animatics and how-to storyboard videos and like storytelling videos that are these YouTube videos that like I share if this were an in-person class. It's not an in-person class, so I would highly recommend taking some time this afternoon and watching the videos that I put in the Discord animation link share channel. And what that'll do is you can see examples of this in action. And one of them is even like a Pixar artist doing his, like storyboarding a scene from Ratatouille. Not like during production because it's a tutorial video, but he's almost like, he has the script next to him and is going through like, if I were storyboarding this today, here's what I might do. And then makes a storyboard for Ratatouille, but tells you like everything that goes into his thinking about doing this. So it's a really, really awesome video that I highly recommend you checking out. So let me know if there are any questions so far, either about class housekeeping stuff or any of this like baseline stuff. But I'm going to keep going just to keep the dead air away. But again, please speak up with questions. So let's talk about film grammar. So the thing, and I use the example, and again, like this is an example of I don't say this to like wag my finger at anybody. I say this like fully as an example of how like you trying stuff and then giving feedback, but also like that feedback being like important teachable moments is. So like please, if this applied to anybody, don't think I'm like calling anybody out. I mean this in like the most positive way I can, right? So during the donut assignment, there were a few renders that were sent that like the donut was like far away or something like that, and I could tell that the camera really hadn't been moved around a lot. And again, that's fine. I don't say this is a bad thing, but it gave us an opportunity to talk about, again, the teachable moment of that was that like I see there's a thing in young designers, and not like you all specifically, but that I've seen in many young designers, because I had this like when I was teaching 3D in my first job at a school that was one of those schools that like just gave certificates for software, right? Where somebody would make this beautiful thing and then hit render and then just turn in whatever was rendered, and like the thing was a mile away. And it's because that's a great example of like, it's not about the software thing. You've got to then take that thing you create in the software and then like put it together in a really compelling way. And that's where film grammar comes in, because you start to learn about how you tell stories, how you compose, how you express with the framing of a shot. The shot is your language. And the way you do shots is how you have a conversation. So we've talked a lot about how cartoons and animation are not simulation, they are representation. Well, this is another example of how we do that, because we can use we can use the position and the settings of a camera, and I'm talking about this in like purely 3D terms, but like even just, how we arrange a drawing to sell an idea, not like in a commercial way, but like to really kind of make the audience feel the idea. So we talked about like when you have Bugs Bunny, you're animating Bugs Bunny, you need to, because he is not a real wabbit, you need to like do things in how we build his motion. We're going to talk about those things. We talked about a few, but we'll continue to talk about those things to like tell the audience so that their eyes and brain can interpret the animation properly, what's about to happen. So if he's about to hit somebody with a mallet, you need him to like wind up for reasons we'll talk about. And whereas like humans need to wind up for momentum's sake, but if you're about to hit somebody, you can just hit. It may not be as good as if you wind up a little bit, but like humans can do things in very different ways that if you tried to animate that way, it would look bad, for a variety of reasons we've talked about. So it's the same thing with like how we compose shots. You're gonna see we don't do things as we would in real life. We have to make a lot of changes, a lot of modifications to make something read clearly. But along with that, and same thing with the principles of animation, part of it is just like getting the audience on board. But if we master these techniques, we can also use them as powerful storytelling tools. So when you're thinking about think about a movie as a essay, and that might be very literal, like a documentary, or it might be just like as a book, like a film. So a frame, which is like a single still image, that's a letter of a. You're like, is this serious? Yes. Imagine that as a letter of a word, a frame. So frames compose a shot. So, think about like when a character has the camera on their face in a close-up. That's a shot. And the shot is going to cut to another shot, but that is your word in your sentence. So you are like, the way that shots are composed over the course of a scene is, those are like the words of your sentence. And then the scene is your sentence. That is your like statement of, you have like shot, 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 shot. And that creates like a contained story scene. Like we are walking down the street to work, and what are and having a conversation about something like what we did last night, and that scene, things happening in a setting, over a period of time. That is like your sentence of your story. So maybe the scene is to establish. The conversation establishes exposition about the world, or it's dialogue that moves the story along, or something happens in the action scene and like, they have to run from a monster or something like that. That's what the scene is, but it's like, place and time. And then the sequence, so if we have like, a monster, like they're walking down the street and a monster attacks, that's a scene. And then maybe like they run into the building, and then that's a different scene because something else happens, or we switch to another scene where people are seeing the monster attack from another point of view. That's, if you have a sequence of those, that establishes a paragraph of your overarching story. So that's what a sequence of scenes is. Like, okay, the monster attacks the city, and it's people realizing it. That's a sequence of scenes, and not the like, now everybody's going to escape and here's how. that's like the next sequence. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat. I'm going to keep going. So those are like the different divisions of things, but like what are the how do these shots work? How do we use them to best effect? Well, been talking a long time. There's a few elements of like how we compose our shots that will help us like create certain feelings and emotions in the shots. So for example, again, this is not a random process. So like in the beginning of photography as a art, it was argued that, and film went through this too, it was argued that those things were not arts because your your tool is a camera which captures reality. So, artists were like, well, photography can't be an art because the artist isn't doing anything. They're just pointing and shooting. Well, over time and how things become an art, we are currently living in an era where games are dealing with this, is that you develop a critical discourse, meaning like you develop a language of aesthetics by which you then discuss the art and establish what is good aesthetic and bad aesthetic. And then you create a set of guidelines. People probably then like subvert the guidelines and create experimental stuff. But that's how like an art happens. And when you get into photography and film, what eventually came out as the art of this is that it's not so much that the person doing the photography is creating what's in the image the way a painter would. It's that they are composing and staging the image that they are going to photograph. And that composition and staging and sometimes awareness, if you're, taking like, footage of the background, or like you are just taking kind of like photos of the world around you, that awareness of a moment is what creates good like photography or film. So when you are making film yourself or when you are animating, we do this with how we lay out our composition of our scene. Now in animation, this actually is really one-to-one because you are drawing it, or you are arranging your 3D models in a way in relation to a camera object. So we actually do get a little bit like literally closer to, fine art in that way. So framing is the composition of a shot. It's what is in the scene and what is literally in the camera. Staging is how you position characters and the camera in relationship to each other in a scene. So if we look at the top row for framing, we see that there's a shot of a teacher giving a lecture. So maybe that's the opening of our animation here, where it's like she's giving the lecture. So like womp 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 math womp 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 math, right? So she's giving her lecture. So then the staging, maybe it pulls back. And then we see the staging get a little more interesting, is that she's in the right third. So you might have heard of the rule of threes. It's like, imagine a image is cut into like 3 parts horizontally and 3 parts vertically. Putting things in like, instead of in the center on one of those like thirds is actually a really good way to create a more dramatic shot. So like if you see on the top right where we see the teacher, she's not in the center. She's actually like a little bit over in the at the like mark of the last horizontal third of the image. That makes it more interesting to a better shot. So like if we then on the staging row pull back and we see the student in the front and the teacher in the back, first of all, notice that they're on like the first the one, they're each on like a third, like the divider between the thirds horizontally. But then notice like now we're getting a sense of something. We're seeing our characters. We have a teacher giving a lecture, and we have a bored student. This may be some of you right now. Thank you for putting up with my lecturing. But we're starting to get a sense of a relationship here. The student is bored, the teacher is giving her lecture. The student might be daydreaming, so we have a story starting to be told. It's not like, the great American novel, but it doesn't need to be. It is a story. There's something happening here, and there's like a tension, right, between teacher wanting to do the lecture and student being kind of bored. So then, we might have some motion. So like, let's do things with the camera. So teacher notices that student is bored and is maybe doodling or writing a note or doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So the teacher like moves close to the student. So maybe it cuts to a shot of like, you look up and the teacher is pointing down at the student. Now motion, so like the staging changes. The teacher is being shot in a certain way that creates a different like understanding of the, emotion of the moment. And then the motion of the camera itself, the literal, like how we move the camera might do some certain things. Like maybe we were looking down at a doodle and then quickly up so that it's sort of like an abrupt moment of surprise. Or maybe it's like we're looking at the doodle and then it slowly pans up because the student's like, oh no, I'm screwed. And is like trying to cling to those last moments of like not being in trouble because, they're looking up or something like that. But that creates, that's storytelling. That's how you do storytelling with this kind of camera action and the arrangement of your scene. And then editing is once you get all this footage, whether it be like film footage or drawn footage, if you have film or you have lots of money, you can probably get like multiple versions of things. Basically, you take all these shots, cut them up in something like Adobe Premiere, and then put them together into like a composition where, the way editing works in storytelling is like if you've got an action scene, you're going to have shots and like cut really fast, like characters, like it changes shots really quickly, maybe, like with a quick cut instead of like a elegant crossover or, something like if you're George Lucas, it's going to have a circle wipe. But, that's how you edit those things. That editing itself can be a storytelling component. How you have like certain dialogue over certain action and things like that. And that's why they give like dialogue or editing Oscars, right? Because that is in and of itself a storytelling component. So that's elements of film grammar. And the juxtaposition. So juxtaposition is like when two things are next to each other and how they're contrasting or what their relationship is. Juxtaposition is often used when you talk about like two contrasting things. So if you want to see some like really good cinematography in action, obviously there's like lots and lots and lots of examples of this in the history of film, but one movie that really set the stage for storytelling with cinematography was the movie Citizen Kane. And somebody last class brought up like the movies of Wes Anderson, which I totally agree with, and you should check out Wes Anderson's use of this. But like in Citizen Kane, for example, which is a movie from 1940, or is it 41? I can't remember. Blanking on it right now. But, you'd have something like two characters find something in a shot or in a scene, and they rush into a room and they're like wondering, oh, how did this happen? And so you see something in the background, the characters like talking about it and having a dialogue. But in the foreground, you would see like a thing that indicates exactly what happened. And it's not important that the characters know. It's important that you know and that you are having that story told to you. The characters are wondering what's up, but because of the framing of the shot and in the foreground you see the thing that the characters are missing, you get a sense of like what the story is. And it doesn't tell you through exposition dialogue, it tells you through framing of a shot. So it's incredibly effective. And again, that's how storytelling with film works. So there are different shots. So the type of shot you use helps determine the feeling of the framing. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you have like shot sizes. So like, what's the difference between a long shot or a medium shot? So like an extreme long shot might be character is waiting for the bus, and you have an extreme long shot of them at the bus stop and some people like standing around and like on their phone. So it creates this like maybe serene feeling, but also establishes that this character is like, waiting for the bus. Or, if this is like Neon Genesis Evangelion, like it's Shinji and he is looking pensive and nervous while everybody seems like relaxed. So, you have these kind of, again, like these long shots can help establish story, but then something happens and like, okay, so let's go on this Evangelion rabbit hole here. So a building blows up and he sees the angel attack. So then you get like a close up or even a big close up of his face, realizing, oh my gosh, this is happening. And then, then maybe like a quick cut to, something else. But that follow-up of like the close-up of Shinji might be followed with let's go shot angles, a low angle of the monster attacking the city. And what that does is it establishes like, we are very small and it is very big. And it being very big and shot from below gives it a sense of power. Whereas if we're viewing it from like worm's eye or low, do not have that power. We are beneath it. It is, and you're going to see that in the Pixar storyboarding video. They talk about like, it's the guy does the scene where Ego from Ratatouille, where the food critic Ego is ordering food at I'm blanking on the name of the restaurant, which is terrible because it's like the point of the movie. But he's ordering food, and the wait, like, what are the shots of like the waiter is made to be very small and Ego is made to be very big because he is this like presence in the scene, whereas the waiter is not as present. He's like the waiter. So on the flip side, if we go with like the school thing, if we have eye level, maybe the characters are talking to each other. Maybe it's two students talking to each other. If it's a high shot, maybe the character is like, oh no, I'm going to the principal's office. Waiting outside of the principal's office, you are looking down and so it's a high shot. You're looking down at the character, and that looking down makes the character feel small. So, so that establishes like maybe the character is nervous, and then maybe later the character is in a spelling bee, and you get a bird's eye shot because the character is very small, and then you have this world around it that's creating this tension because, oh my gosh, they feel very nervous, but oh my god, I'm gonna misspell Mississippi. Oh yeah, yep, you got it. Gusteau's, the restaurant. So Chef Gusteau. So yeah, like the shots by the positioning and where a character is within the frame and where the camera is, I hope what you get from this is that, and a lot of this is in your green book, the ideas for animated short, but I hope what you get from this is that you select where you are positioning your camera, even if it is just like, you're not literally drawing, or you're not literally having a camera, but you're just like drawing a picture. You plan that, and then you use that as a language of storytelling to set a scene. Again, actually, go watch Evangelion. It makes really good use of these. Shot organization. So like, who's in the shot and what is happening, because that can help you do stuff. How characters are placed or staged helps create different emotion. If you have asymmetry. So like on the right, so if two characters are fighting, they should be on opposite sides of the shot. You know, unless you're doing, like I said in the last class, an Aaron Sorkin thing where like they're walking down the hallway together, which you may not understand the reference to, but it's like, you know, when I was in college, like The West Wing was a popular show. So that was always his trademark, is two characters would talk quickly walking down a hallway. And sometimes that would be an argument, but, you know, they're not standing facing each other. So like, there's stylistic reasons to break these general rules, but generally, especially when you're developing, you want to follow some of these rules to get a sense of like how this all works. So shot organization, being on different sides of a shot helps create, you can show opposition, but also, you know, how you create, like who's in the foreground, who's in the background, creates like storytelling. So you get the sense that in the above shot there is a argument happening, but either you have a gang on the left that's about to beat that guy up and he's standing up to them as like as the little guy, or maybe, you know, it's the opposite. Maybe this is like some jerk and everybody's like, you know, oh man, that jerk, and he's like, blah blah blah. I don't know. It's 2020. I can't really make up some sort of argument that's like, yeah, Xbox is better than PlayStation. You know, that seems like the least divisive thing because it's video game consoles. And please don't people start going like, no, it's better than. I'm not expressing any type of opinion. I'm just saying, like, you know, I wanted to find something that isn't really, in the grand scheme of things, that divisive. But like, you know, you have one versus the many, and that's what you're establishing with this shot. You're like, you can have that, but imagine how boring this shot would be if they were just like three people on one side and then one here, as opposed to like, you know, this. I have no idea. Let me look at my, you know, as opposed to like that. Like, that is cooler than that, right? So, and same thing with like the other one on the bottom. You want to have this asymmetry because maybe the character on the right is not moving a lot, but you want to focus a lot more on their expression, whereas the character in the background is the one in motion. They're the one moving around. They're the one who's doing a lot of their communicating via body language. So, you know, how you do this and how you do this shot composition is really important. Let me switch back to my... Boop, boop, boop. So staging is really about silhouettes. And what does that mean? Well, and I've talked about this before, but this is like the slide where I get to really talk about it. So silhouettes are the idea that if you were to black out a frame of animation, would you be able to understand what is... it doesn't even have to be every frame, but like mainly it's going to be in your key poses. But, you know, if you black out a frame of animation, can you read what's happening? And like I said, this doesn't have to be every frame. It should at least be your key poses. Your in-betweens probably are going to go by fast enough that they're not going to do anything bad if they're a little like together. And in most motions, you're going to have stuff where it's like the body is squished together for reasons, as you see like in the bad version. But if that bad version on the right is your key pose, that is bad. You want the key poses to be super clean, and then they'll read really nice. So, you know, if we have a duck magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, if that's happening in the cartoon and we black this out, on the left, that version of the pose, you can see that he's a duck. You can see that you don't necessarily see that he's in a tuxedo, but you do see that he has a vaguely hat-shaped object and that he is pulling a vaguely rabbit-shaped object out of it. So when the lights go back on, aha, you were right. Oh, he's a magician. Okay. Now, if you were to make the one on the left your key pose and you silhouette it out, you know, look what's happening. You don't see that he's a duck. Not that it's important that he's a duck. Maybe it is, but you miss that element of him, so that the feet then suddenly become kind of confusing. You're like, he must be a duck. He has webbed feet. But you can be like, well, I think I kind of see arms, but I don't know what's going on, and I can't really see his legs very well because, now we know the hat's in the way, but we don't know what's going on in that silhouette as much. And then when you turn the lights on, it's like, oh, he's pulling a rabbit out of the hat. But because he's turned towards you, you don't see what's going on. And in fact, like, that version of it actually looks like he's sneakily sneaking the rabbit into the hat, which is kind of, I don't know. But assuming that it is the rabbit pulling out of the hat scene, that is a much worse version than the version on the left, which is super duper clear. So the idea is that you want your drawings and even down to your character design to be super clear if you were to black everything out. So that's what silhouette is about. And the main parts of your shots should, like, if you were to silhouette them, should read cleanly. And I'm going to say this again. This is another example of how it is not, it's not simulation. It is representation. Because, if you're going to have a conversation with a person, you're going to stand looking at them, turn to them, right? That doesn't create a interesting shot. So the one that says bad staging on the bottom, that is how, like, human beings talk. But we're also not performing, and if you go and watch a play, you're not going to see performers do that either. Like, that would be bad staging on a stage. So what instead, you would do as an animator, and what characters do in film or on a stage, is they will turn slightly towards the audience. Even if they are talking to each other, you want to see their fronts in front of you so that you can get an idea of who they are and you can see them properly. And that will read much better. So staging is really important in that way. Let's look at this scene. So this scene could easily, from Wreck-It Ralph, this could easily be a mess, but it's not. In fact, it's a really effective scene. So actually, this might be a good opportunity to open it up to, like, what do you think of this scene? What are things you notice about its staging? Like, who is the focus? Why? How is that character who is the focus established as the focus in the layout of the scene? Can we see all of these other characters that Disney paid a lot of money for the rights to use, / that the IP owners probably had very specific directions on how to show them in the scene? Like, what's going on here in terms of staging? Don't tell me what the story is. Like, how is this staged to tell the story? For those who don't know, this is a scene from Wreck-It Ralph. It's a movie about a video game villain who doesn't want to be the villain anymore. He wants to be a hero. So he breaks out of his own game and goes into other games trying to be a hero. And this is an early scene where he is he's in a support group for bad guys in video games, where they're not actually bad guys. That's just like their role. Ralph is the focus. He seems dejected and kind of an outlier. Okay. Now here's the question: Is he a like social outlier? Is he more an outlier in terms of his particular mental state, or is it perhaps that, like, he is positioned and characters are positioned around him to emphasize his centrality to the scene? Because, like, the movie is named after him, right? So what do you think? And this is not like a right answer, wrong answer thing. Let's discuss. . Okay, so while this catches up, I'll offer some I'll offer some thoughts, and when chat catches up, I'll read off what's in the chat. But like, so let's let's start with like rules of thirds, right? Ralph is dead is dead center, but he's upper third, which is actually, again, that helps in two ways. One, it makes it more interesting, but two, silhouette shows him be a bit saddened with his shoulders downward. So that's a good point. Is like the ways that Ralph is central to this scene. Position top third in the center, and no other character is in the center, because like Clyde, who's running the workshop, is not in the center. He is a little off to the side. So we've established Ralph as the center. The angle of the camera allows us to... Everyone else is relaxed. He seems more contemplative. Very closed body language, at least to those. So his body language contrasts everybody else. And we're not necessarily... We're learning about body language in this lecture in terms of like silhouetting, but not necessarily in terms of like the acting part. That's... I don't know. It's almost like a theme throughout the course. We do have acting for animators a little bit. But, you do see, he is contrasting in his body language. He's hunched forward. Everybody's leaned back, except for Bowser, who can't really lean back. But, he is alone a little bit, and that helps emphasize him as the center. Is like all the other characters seem kind of cloistered a little bit. Zombie and Diablo are like a little to the side, and that gives him some space to be the center of attention in this scene. The shot, like the positioning of the shot and where we are looking down, actually helps us see everybody, because it'd be super easy for this scene to be just like mud, and for it to be this like flat row of characters with Ralph and the bad guy, the rhino bad guy from Altered Beast, and Bowser, like their heads poking out. But because we're looking down at the shot, we can see everybody. So that's really nice. It reads really cleanly. And again, putting Ralph in the center, characters off to the side, contrasting body language helps us see like Ralph is the center of attention. He's the center of the story. And, we have an emotional context of the support group. The other thing that is really nice is because of the positioning and because of the framing and the composition of the shot, or the staging of the shot, all of the characters can be seen clearly. And this is important in this particular instance because, like, for example, Nintendo was like, sure, you can use Bowser, but you have to follow these guidelines on how to show him. So he needed to like be of a certain size. He needed to be like prominent in shots, things like that. And, so this also helps in those elements that you can see that there's Mortal Kombat characters and Diablo, and the only character that like is a little hurt by this shot is Robotnik. And if you can't see Robotnik, he's like wedged in between M. Bison and Zangief. But, he's like the only one you can't see. But Sega gets it better. Sega gets their payback later when, Sonic has a speaking line. Ralph's physically one of the larger, yeah. He's larger than a lot of the other characters. And yes, so like his posture kind of gives him, again, that sort of visual contrast with everybody. He's also like the best lit and has some of the warmer colors. Because if you were to like immediately look at this shot, you're going to see Bowser, you're going to see Clyde, because like you can't not see Clyde. Clyde being the ghost from Pac-Man in the foreground. He's the leader of the support group. And like, yeah, the Beholder kind of stands out with that particular shade of green. But, you can... Those seem to have like the best contrast with the scene around them. Thank you for participating in the discussion. All right, so shot motion. Shot motion can have a very similar effect to shot positioning. So do you have like the camera panning across things. Panning can do certain things like we saw at the beginning, with the camera panned from the groom's side to the bride and the groom to the bride side of that wedding storyboard thing. That can tell you a lot, how you have the camera move, zooming in, zooming out. So you can enact like these scene transitions either with cuts, so like long shot, close shot, when like chilling at bus stop monster attacks, like, you can have a quick cut to that, or you can have like a sudden zoom in. So motion is another ingredient in your toolkit, but in like a mental toolkit. Like you're really just all doing this with a camera, whether that be an actual camera object in a 3D scene that will render out of, or if you're doing it as like, at frame 47, it cuts to a close-up, so you like draw a close-up as opposed to like, I have to emphasize, like when you're doing this with hand animating, you are just, except for cases where maybe you are doing like TV animation where you're doing that thing where like you have one background of SpongeBob and then you have like, so you put that background down and then you put SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs and then you zoom in because you're reusing the background asset. Like when you're drawing, when you're just straight up drawing, you can like just draw the shot. So, clarification when you're not using a physical or digital camera. But you can do things like, go up the character's body, tilt up to look at the character. Again, if you're doing that sort of thing with the teacher where it's like, oh no, I'm in trouble. There's lots of things that the motion of the camera, the motion of the shot can be very powerful as a means of storytelling. Let me know if there's any questions on this. So storyboards, like what? So we know this grammar. How do we build a storyboard? Well, storyboards are like outlines of shots. They are just like, they are your comic strip where you plan out the shot. So we've seen already that we have pre-production. We've established all the characters, who they are. We've written a script. We may have done even the radio play. And what you're going to do then is like when you're laying out your actual episode or short or whatever, you build a storyboard. And that storyboard is just like, again, let's take guesswork away from animators. They don't need to guess. Because, so a few things. In the animation industry, sometimes you may not even be doing the animating. You might do some animation, but sometimes there are like, if you're in the US, you are doing all of this pre-production planning, and then you like farm the animation out to something a place overseas in like, Korea or Japan or something like that. That's very common. That's a very, very common practice. So storyboarding and like all of these steps you take to eliminate guesswork for the animators, well, think of this in the context of if that animator is in a different country. You don't want to miss information, or you don't want to miss specification and then send it to them and then have them guess as to what you want and then get something like really terrible back. So that's why like you reduce questions. But if you're producing the animation in-house, it's still, there's a little element of that, except you can go up to the person and talk to them. But you also just want to like have a good plan. You want to have everybody kind of move well in sync. You want to make it as painless as possible. So storyboards are your visual outline of the movie. They're where you're like, at this shot at this point should be like this shot at this point should be like that. And in some of these storyboards you will actually see like the action and the line of dialogue are in the on the storyboard document itself. So it'll have like the line of dialogue under the image. So storyboards are like, you're basically making the comic strip version of the movie that you will then use as the basis of your animation. Storyboards do not need to look even this nice. Here's a storyboard. Like, this is super duper basic and sketchy. And they have lines of dialogue, and they have, like, here's what the shot happens when guy says, Dr. Floyd, yeah, or, you know, so the characters, like, are having a dialogue, and it's cutting back and forth to their faces in close-up. And then at one point, it has a more medium shot, waist up, of them talking, and then it goes back to, like, dialogue, right? So, you know, you have images, like the lines of dialogue underneath the pictures, and then you have the images of them, like what it is when it says, like, each line of dialogue. So, but, you know, look at this thing. It's super sketched out. It is not this, like, elegant museum piece. Sometimes you see elegant museum pieces, and we'll talk about why you might do that. But most of the time, especially if you are presenting to other animators on your own team, it's usually enough to just have something kind of like whipped together. Because you're also going to see, this is not a, like, I do this once and it must be perfect process. This is a, so you see here, for example, there's like these nice forms that, like, you know, a template for storyboards, and people use those. But we're going to see in a second, there's actually, like, these serve an important, almost like prototyping purpose. So real quick, here's another storyboard. This one, like, for purely action, no dialogue. But you see here, like, not only are we composing the shot with, you're composing the shots so that they show the action in their settings well, but you also can use, like, lots of arrows for, you know, if the camera's supposed to, like, zoom in, you can have, like, an arrow that seems to, like, move into the frame in perspective to, like, indicate, you know, camera zooms or stuff like that. Use arrows to indicate how motion's supposed to work. Those are, you know, this is your idea, this is your draft. You want to make your language very clear, and if that includes, like, diagramming arrows, that's great. Here's one that does look super, super nice. It has lots of high draftsmanship. But the story is really clear. This is clearly for a motorcycle commercial. And so, you know, what's happening here? You have businessy businessman, and he's like, oh, time to go business. Gonna put on my business coat. All right, and then he walks out into the garage, past the cool motorbike, and he goes to his business car, and then he's like, business car, but what if cool bike? And then he gets on cool bike, and then you get, like, shot of the thing lighting up, and then you have, like, shot of bike, and then, you know, hits the road, right? So we can see, like, if you're pitching this as, like, here's our commercial idea, this is a super clear commercial. This is a super clear storyboard. You could animate that, like, now. You can make this cartoon now, right? You can make this ad, like, right away, because this is, like, you know, all you got to do is, like, actually animate this guy typing. But you kind of know, like, you're going to have a second or two of, like, typing, and then you're going to have the shot of, like, time to go, you know. But this is, like, you're ready to go if you have this laid out, right? Now, again, so why is that the draftsmanship so high? But, like, you know, understand, like, super clear idea. So, all right. Now, why is that super clear? Like, why is this one so nice and these ones so bad? Not bad, but you know what I mean, like, sketchy. Whereas this one's super detailed and nice. Well, because storyboarding serves a few different functions. So, like, this is clearly for an ad, for, like, Kawasaki or Honda or something. And, you know, if you're presenting to a client, you want something that looks super nice. But, you know, if you're talking to your animator buddies, you can be a little less, you know, a little less nice. And that's an important aspect of storyboarding. And I realize we're almost at time, but, you know, give me a few more minutes. That's a super important aspect of storyboarding that I think is worth talking about, is that, you know, so this is a shot from, like, Pixar storyboarding, and It's unclear because it's actually a YouTube video, but I'm not going to show the YouTube video because this isn't an in-person class, and I don't want to get caught for. I don't want anybody to like do copyright claims on my lecture video. You know, if that looks like an intimidating amount of storyboard, it should. It's for a feature film. We're not making one that big. But like, notice that they're all on note cards. And, you know, here's a shot from last week. They're also on note cards. And then here's another shot that they're on note cards. But notice that the guy is taking note cards off and putting them back on. So storyboarding, when you're not doing it on those nice forms, a reason to not do them on the nice forms and the nice templates is that if you do them on a, like, say, set of note cards, you can, you have the freedom to be able to be like, you know, like we were talking about with pitching, you know, this doesn't look so good here, but I bet like these shots would make a lot more sense if we switched them. Or, you know, I don't like the way that shot is, so let's scrap it. You know, imagine if that one shot that wasn't working was on a nice template. You'd either have to like cut it out and then like paste in a new one, or you'd have to like scrap the whole template sheet and then you'd have to redraw everything. Not that it would take you forever because you're sketching, but the ability to only have to like redraw one card as opposed to like a bunch is much better. Like, you want to be able to do this quick. It's prototyping, it's pitching, it's discussion and dialogue with your creative team. So you basically put all these cards on the board and you talk about it, and you like say, no, move that there, move this there. I think the character should walk in here. I think this shot should be a wider shot, you know, and you're just like figuring your cartoon out and throwing cards away and drawing new ones. Sometimes you do it by going away and coming back, or sometimes, like, again, let's draw like this. We can just like do a quick doodle on a card and put it on the board. And, you know, that helps in this whole process. In fact, like, that's what this video is the video is called Pixar Storyboarding Mini Doc. If you go check that out, I might have to go hunt this down and put it into the Discord chat. But, you know, you see that in process. You see people being like, no, not that one, this one, kind of thing. So this is like a creative brainstorming session. Like, this is a critique session. And, you know, once you've gone through that, once you've figured that out, then you can take your storyboard and you can pin it up on your bulletin board. And then, you know, you can just sit down and animate. Like, you have the only question is like the actual, you know, drawing. Like, the composition's done, the script, you understand it. You understand when certain shots are supposed to be on what pieces of dialogue. You've just got to sit down and make it at that point. And again, here's another one. So last thing real quick, thanks for sticking around. What is an animatic? Because remember, your final project is an animatic. What is an animatic? It's nothing but a animated storyboard. And what I mean by that is you would take your drawings for your storyboard and you'll like scan them in. And I have examples of animatics. I have one from a music video from the Gorillaz, and I have a 3D one that'll show you like how a 3D animatic is made of, like, you know, the earliest draft versions of things without even any actual like motion on them. Like, you'll have if you have a character walk off the screen, they just sort of, you know, slide off the screen or T-pose off the screen. They don't like walk. That's too much work for an animatic. But you almost make like a storyboard, like a video slideshow of your frames of stuff, and that will help you like see your storyboard as a movie when each shot will appear as though you're watching it as a movie. And again, you'll get a real sense of how simple that is when you see, you know, you have like the camera move the way it's supposed to move, you know, you have the cuts happen when they're supposed to happen and at what lyric of music or line of dialogue, but they're super simple. but they are a highly effective visualization tool. But that is like, again, that last stage, and it's not even like used in every production, but it is a last stage if you need it to eliminate those questions of like how it's going to feel as a film. But that's it. Let me know if there are any questions. Are there any questions? I'll wait around for a second or two, but otherwise I'll be around for Discord chat and things like that. So I hope you learned a lot. There's no lecture on Thursday. This will just be, you have some time to get stuff done. Like I said, your homeworks, I know I've been getting a lot of questions about the big projects in the class. Your projects are the storyboard for a potential animation and the animatic for the potential animation. The idea is that it may not, but it can build up towards your eventual animation project class project. So that is a class you'll take, animation project. So the idea is that you would potentially be making an animatic that can become part of that. Animation project, I think the project for that, I talked to Tim, he said it's between a minute and a minute and a half. You are making stuff for between a 30-second to a minute. So either you'd like make this and it would be part of your final for that class, or you could also, because you have to work in groups in that class, you could potentially just like not end up making your thing necessarily because of the way groups work out. But think in terms of like you are setting the stage for the animation production, which would happen in that class. So this is sort of unrelated, but when we turn in assignments, do they need to be only Blackboard or Blackboard in the Google Drive? I know that for the practices, but also for any assignment. Blackboard is the easiest way to get it. Okay. I realize that's contradictory to how I usually operate. I check both. Blackboard does that handy thing where I can, like, in online classes, just go and like look at everything, but I also check both. So I make sure that, like, I need to go check the Google Drive. I haven't checked it in a little while, but like I am checking both, if that makes sense. So like you're covered if you hand it in either way. All right. Again, I'll be around, but thanks for coming. Thanks for hearing me talk about animatics and storyboarding. I hope this was informative, and I will see you in chat.